Jeff Gibbons here with another Reason video, and in this one I'm going to be going over Reason 11's latest update. And this brings with it a bunch of new features, which we've all been kind of waiting for, as well as something called the Beatmap, which is a new player designed specifically for drums. So we'll see how we can use that with the drums in Reason or with any other virtual instrument. So I'm going to be showing you this as it pertains to using Reason as a rack device. I'm going to be using it inside Cubase, but of course everything I do here applies to other programs. And I'm also going to be using other virtual instruments. I'll talk about those as we go along. But first off, the thing you need to know about this Reason 11 update is that it brings with it the ability to get MIDI out of the Reason rack. So that was something that was missing from the first version of Reason 11 when we had this as a rack device. And we couldn't use any of the players in Reason. We couldn't use those with our other virtual instruments in our DAW of choice. So what this means now is you can use anything in Reason that has some kind of MIDI output. So we'll look at the players. We'll also look at the Rex players like the Octo Rex or Dr. Rex. And we'll see how we can get MIDI out of those different devices into other things in your DAW. So let's have a look at this. So what I've got here is just a little kind of cheesy tune I'm working on to show you some of the features. And this is the Beatmap device here, by the way. But before I even get to the Beatmap, let me show you how they've implemented MIDI out from the Reason rack. It's a really neat little way they've done it, and they've had to add a separate device for some of the things, and then other things they just have the ability to drag the MIDI right outside of Reason. So let me start with a new instrument track, and I'm just going to load up Reason Rack plugin, and I am going to load up a Dr. Octo Rex, just to show you what this is all about. So you can see Dr. Octo Rex here. It's just the Rex player in Reason, which plays Rex files. Very similar to something like Stylus, and you can load all sorts of Rex files in there. You can make your own Rex files and then drop them in here as well. So let's see how they've implemented this. If we've got a loop in here, so there is just the stock loop that it comes with. And so for Dr. Octo Rex, all you have to do is click this little drag MIDI notes thing right here. Take that and drop it right onto your project. And the MIDI is put right into your project. We can see the slices down below. So we can move these slices around. I can move this snare drum hit a little bit earlier. Oh, whoops, I think the loop player is still playing. So just be aware of that. I'm going to hit the little instrument button here and make sure I turn off Enable Loop Playback. Once you've dropped your loop in, turn off Enable Loop Playback, and then now I can hear that. Maybe you want another kick right there, so I just drop in another kick, and that's the way the Rex players work in Reason. I won't go over how they work in this video. I saved that for another video. But for anyone who wants to use the Rex players, you can now use it right inside your DAW. And it works just the way you hope it would. So very exciting for those of us who loved working with the Rex players back in the day. So I can get rid of that one for now. Let's look at another thing that they've done. So let's say you're in Reason and you've got a synthesizer, and then you've also got a utility. Let's put a matrix pattern sequencer on there. So I can go in and make a little pattern here. Okay, so there's a little pattern that I've whipped up in the matrix pattern sequencer, something I used to use, again, back in the day a lot. I really loved working with that little easy sequencer. So now all I need to do is grab that same MIDI symbol, drag it onto my Cubase project, and then make sure I turn off the pattern right here, turn off that little button, and then of course spits it out as MIDI. And then we have all of the players. There's a whole bunch of players, and these work with MIDI information. And they do things like scales and chords. You hold down one note and it will automatically build a chord out of that one note based on some parameters. So then you can play with one finger and get these complex chords out of Reason. And I'll show you how we can use that with other virtual instruments inside your DAW, which is super cool. So scales and chords, we've got the new Beatmap, which you find under players, and then we've got things like arpeggiators and echoes, a drum sequencer, and then a couple other things that manipulate the notes in a very complex way. So we're not going to get too much into these different devices. All I want to do today is show you how they can be used, how you can work with them inside Reason. So let's look at Beatmap first. I've got it up here in this little project. And this is Beatmap. And if you were to use it inside Reason, you'd have the Beatmap player, and then you'd have a drum machine of some sort playing underneath it. If you go to the Reason Studios YouTube channel, you're going to see an amazing video on this device. So I'm not going to walk you through how this device works too much, but let's just have a quick look at what it does. You press this run button, and it's going to send drum information or basic drum information to whatever drum machine you are working with. So whether that's in Reason or whether it's an external device. And I just happen to love the kits in Maschine. I've got a Maschine drum kit from the Basement Era expansion, which I'll put a link to in the description, a really great expansion pack. And then what I've done is I've taken this instrument track with the Reason Rack plugin on it, and then I made a Maschine track. And the coolest part about this is you can make your Maschine track, and then you can have the Reason track send the MIDI information to Maschine. So I've just loaded up a blank project so you can see how we'd set up a Maschine kit with the Reason Beatmap together. So first thing you do is make a Reason Rack plugin track. And I will take the player and drop that right into it. And then you make your Maschine track. So I will make a Maschine track in Cubase. Here you can go to your device and you can browse for the patch that you want. So I'll go to Basement Era, load up a kit. And the only thing you're going to need to change in Maschine is to go to the group of your kit right here. Then I'm going to go to the input, and I'm going to change this input and make sure it's on MIDI and input. I'm going to change this to manual. And then the only other thing you need to do is set your channel to channel 1. And then now we go over to our tracks in Cubase or whatever program you're in. And I'm going to set the input of this track to be coming from Reason Rack plugin event out. And then if I go to the Reason Rack plugin, I'm not going to worry about that one at all. So now if I hit the run button, we can hear that it is working. That's all we have to do. If I turn this button off, nothing happens. If I turn it on, so make sure the record enable button is turned on your Maschine track. So now what you would do is you'd mess around with Beatmap, you'd press record, and all of the MIDI information coming from this device gets recorded onto your track. Now we could turn off this device, press play, and it's just going to be triggering Maschine. We could go in, we could edit that information, play around with it a little bit, but let's not worry about that right now. It's as simple as that though, as far as getting MIDI out of this player device in Reason into a track in Maschine. So let's have a look at this device before I open up that other project. So this is Beatmap right here. We've got this bizarre looking thing. They've got random drum beats kind of all over this map. And what you get to do is grab your map and slide it around until you find a beat that you like. But it's not random in the sense that it's just going to trigger kick and snare and hi-hat randomly. Under the surface here, they've got actual logical drum beats with varying complexities. What you do as you slide around this little axis right here, you're going to hear these different drum beats starting up. So the map itself is somewhat arbitrary. But as you slide around, you're just going to find different drum beats. And what you can do is slide around until you find a kick that you like. And then once you've found one that you like, you lock it in with this little position. And then you can go around and try and find a hi-hat pattern or a snare pattern. And you don't have to worry about the kick pattern changing. So it's very bizarre. It's a very weird way to work, but I kind of love it, to be honest. So let's just listen to the kick specifically. You know what I'm finding is this map isn't working with this kind of crunchy lo-fi kit at a slow beats per minute. And so what they've given you is a bunch of different maps to choose. So I think we're going to already have to talk about this. I'm going to click on the map select. These beats are meant for certain genres of music. So let's see what we've got. The first one is temperate. It sounds like it's going to work with a little bit faster beats per minute. We've got arid, which is straight and dry, pop, house, 4 on the floor. So this is going to be something for your faster beats per minute, 120, 130, house music, stuff like that. Then we've got lava, which is hot, fluid, funky breaks and grooves, which is probably what we're going to want for this drum kit. And then this one is uncharted, strange, dubby, trappy stuff. So let's go over to lava and turn off map select, and let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, that's already a pretty cool kick pattern. I'm going to move around. Okay, I like that kick pattern. So say you like a pattern, all you have to do is lock it in. So I'm going to lock in the kick right there, and that pattern that we were hearing, it's basically triggering a MIDI file. That MIDI file is just going to stay on the kick, so it's not going to move around. Then I can go to the snare and I can do the same thing. Actually, let's go to the hi-hat. That's going to be a little bit more obvious. So I'll press play. Actually, I like the snare here, but it's a little busy. So if it's too busy, what you can do is drop down the density, and it's going to give you less of those hits. Okay, that's good. I'm going to lock that one there and then go for the hi-hats. Ooh, it's getting some really intense. That's getting some really intense hi-hats. So let's go for that one right there. I will just lock that one in. The main parts of my kit are locked in. If I don't want any percussion, all I have to do is drag this all the way down, and I just won't hear anything. Let's hear what our pattern sounds like now. So what I recommend you do is go watch the video on the Beatmap. Get your brain around all of these different controls, what these mirrors do. See one more thing, how we get it back onto our track. So all I have to do now that I've got it is press record and make sure record enable is on, and it will dump all of that MIDI onto a track. So here we go. I'm going to press record and let it go. And it starts over. So there is our Beatmap created beat. So what's the point of Beatmap? Well, to me, it is about generating some funky patterns that maybe I wouldn't come up with, drop them into a track, and then go and manipulate that to my heart's content. It's not like working with a loop where you're stuck with a hi-hat and a snare at the same time or something like that. You can go in and change any aspect of this afterwards. So it's kind of like just a drummer who's going to be playing along with you, and you can just go and make some changes. Go dial in, let's go look again at it one more time. Dial in the density, so if you want more complex or less complex, you just drag this slider up and down. And then there's other hits that we can control as well with these lower controls. So it's just a really interesting way to generate drum beats. And I think a lot of people are going to dig this, especially if you're not really much of a drum programmer yourself. Give it a try. It works with Maschine, it works with everything else. So let's go look at some of the other players in the Reason rack and how they can be used inside your DAW. So the first track that I've got here is just a drum beat that I generated with Beatmap. Has some really fun triplety hi-hats in there, and would have probably taken me a long time to program. So there's the drum beat for this one. Did it the same way I did that other beat in the other project there. So that is my kit, and it's going to another basement era kit in Maschine. So next thing I've got is some chords. So let's have a look at what this one is all about. This is a Reason player device. So again, if you go over to players, you'll find the scales and chords up at the top. And this one's a really neat device. It allows you to play one note, and it's going to turn those notes into full thick chords. You can have this thing locking to a key, so I can set the key to something like, let's go to C minor. And what it's going to do is it's going to give every note I play, it's going to give it a 5-note chord based on this control right here. And then it allows me to invert the chord as well. So if we have a 5-note chord and I play a C, I get a C minor 9. The C, E flat, G, B flat, D, those are the notes that it's going to give me. And if I play around with the inversion, it's going to change the position of all of those different notes. Another one. So the same chord, but just different positions. And then we could open up the chords so they spread out, not tight voicings. And then we can do things like add an octave below. I've already got it turned on, so I'll turn that off. Turn it on, turn it off. And then the color, add some other notes like a flat 13. Nice, juicy. So how do you set this player track up? So this is the player. Normally you would have used this in Reason with a Reason device, but in this case, when I load the player in, I automatically get this device that says MIDI out, and that is Reason's way to get MIDI out of a player into your DAW. Okay, so I don't even have a virtual instrument in Reason set up here. All I have is the player and this MIDI out device. I don't have to do anything, that just automatically pops up when I drop a player in. But what it allows me to do is send MIDI out of this device to anywhere else. So that's how I'm getting MIDI out to Maschine for the drums. But let's see how it's working here. I've got a Serum instrument track, and I've got a patch chosen right here. I get my routing set up on the track. So I go up to my piano chords track, which is my Reason track. I don't have to do anything to this one. I can just leave that one the way it is, and it accepts MIDI input from my keyboard. And then I go to my Serum track, and I make sure that this one is set to have MIDI input from my piano chords track, my Reason track. So that one is event out, which goes into my brittle piano patch. So nothing's happening right now when I play the keyboard because it's getting MIDI from Reason. So as long as I am playing MIDI from Reason, and I have this record enable on, I will hear MIDI going through piano chords and going into my brittle piano patch. So I need to have both of those symbols on. That was something that took me a minute to figure out because I was going, why am I not hearing anything? And now I'm hearing something. You can even have this one. You don't even have to have it on record enable. You can just have the monitor button on. So watch what happens when I press play and record. So I'm just playing single notes, but of course the chord MIDI information is now popping up. So then I could go in, I could quantize that, I could change the chords, do all that kind of stuff. This is how the guys over at Reason have figured out how to get MIDI out of the player and onto your tracks. So it's just a little bit of routing, and I'm sure it would be somewhat similar in programs like Logic and Ableton, but it allows you to use their funky player devices with any virtual instrument that you've got. I could go in and change this patch in Serum. And I am using the Echo Soundworks Ashes library of Serum patches. That guy makes incredible patches, by the way. adsrsounds.com, I think, is the website for those ones, and they're very affordable. Okay, so that is the chord player. I'll just open that one up one more time, show you what I've got in here. So something very simple. I don't need this on anymore. So a major 9 chords in this crunchy little cluster made by the Reason player. And this Reason player, by the way, again, go to the Reason Studios YouTube channel. They've got amazing videos that explain all of the controls of these different players. I won't bother with that right now. So next, I've got another Reason Rack plugin. So I think what I did with this one is I started with the dual arpeggio. And I realized if I play a chord, it's going to cycle through the notes. And then what I did is I added, because I realized if I play a chord, obviously that's what the arpeggiator is going to do. It's going to cycle through the notes of that chord. So then I thought, well, why not let Reason do the chords for me? So that's when I added the scales and chords. And now I just hold down one note, and the chords player chooses the notes for me. I could even change the notes to an open chord. Change it to a minor chord, so now I'm in C minor. But let's go back to my chromatic one. And that fits with my little song idea. So that's all I have to do now. Hold down the A and then go to the F sharp. And it's going to cycle between those different chords, which I've got started in my other little idea. So once I'm ready to record that, same thing. I go to my instrument track, which is Massive X here. I've got a Massive X patch called Puffy Mallet. All right. And the MIDI information is just going to go right to that virtual instrument. I record it, and this is what I get with that one. And of course, I have this arpeggiator set to shuffle. That's why we're getting that kind of fun shuffle beat. If you're into arpeggios, you're going to love the dual arpeggiator, because what you can do with that is you can have 2 different arpeggios going on at the same time. You can have one an octave lower. You can have them doing some polyrhythms, really cool stuff. So another player worth checking out. Next, I've got a harp track, and this one is just the Reason Rack. And with that one, I'm using this note echo. So I didn't bother sending the MIDI information out. I just use a Reason Rack extension called Parsec. I think it's Parsec 2, which is a beautiful virtual instrument. And with this one, same idea. I used major 9. So I went and found a major 9 set of note echo. So it's actually making the chord for me in this note echo player. So it's kind of a delay thing, but it's more than that because it's actually adding other notes as well. So this is the note echo, and it's just going to play a major 9 chord whenever I hold down a note. So it just so happens that these chords that I'm playing are major 9 chords. So it just works out quite nicely for this little idea. Next one up, we've got a Rhodes rack. And with this one, I am using the Polystep sequencer. And what I had to do is go punch in the notes that I want to appear in this little sequence. And so if I press play, you'll hear what I put in there. And let me also turn on, there we go. So here I've got a little Rhodes patch coming from Omnisphere. All I have to do is have the Rhodes on for this one, the record enable, and then this sequencer sends MIDI information. So here's my Rhodes rack track, this one right here, and the MIDI information is going into this Omnisphere track. So Rhodes rack event out right there. So the same idea as all the other tracks. I've got this MIDI out going into this Omnisphere track, and once I'm ready to record it, once I'm happy with this thing that I've created, I would just record the track in Cubase. I'll show you that in a second. All I did for this one was actually make 2 different patterns for the 2 different chords. It's a very simple little idea, but what I did is I made a pattern here first for the A chord. And it's a neat sequencer because you can have chords, you can have multiple notes at the same time, and there's all sorts of other crazy stuff you can do to these patterns. And then what I did is I copied this pattern, and I copied all the notes, and then I went to this pattern right here and I pasted them, but then shifted them down a little bit, sort of changed them up. So I have two patterns going on right here for this little idea. You could do this for an entire song. You could have 8 different patterns, idea generation. Then what I did is once I've got my patterns, I'm happy with them, I go over to my track, I press record, I leave it on the first pattern first, so let's get to bar 13. And then the next one. And that's it. So I'm letting the sequencer spill the information onto my track as if I'm playing it. Then once I'm happy with that, I can go in and I can edit the MIDI information that this device just played for me. And I can quantize things, I can change the notes, all the regular stuff I can do with MIDI editing. And then for the bass track, I think I just played that one with the keyboard. So it's just a simple Omnisphere bass. I've got a complex lead track that I played in there as well. I've got a swell track in here as well. So if I click on the little button for that, we can see it's a Serum track. And the MIDI information for that was coming in from the swell rack, which was another player track that I made in the Reason Rack plugin. Click on that one, have a look at it. So we've got scales and chords for that one as well. So if I turn this little button on, there we go. So for these ones, when you're playing notes in, make sure you have the record enable on the rack track, or just the monitor button. So now it's going to send MIDI information through into my Serum patch. And then the last thing I've got here is just a Rex file. So this one is a Rex kit, a loop, and I've got this one right here. If I press the run button, or enable it, and then press the run button, so this is just a Rex file, one that comes with Reason. There's a ton of stuff to choose from there. And then I dragged it onto my track with this little button. Drag it right on. There's the MIDI information. And then what I did is I went in and tweaked the beat so that it lines up with my other beat that I made with Beatmap. All right, so let's have a listen to the entire idea now and see if I didn't mangle it. All right, so I hope you get the idea of how powerful this new update is, what it means for all of the Reason Rack users. If you're not using Reason as a rack device, you're just using Reason, well, you get the free Beatmap player if you are one of the top 2 versions of Reason, so Reason Studio and the one right beneath that. So, and if you don't have that, if you have the entry-level Reason, then you can always buy Beatmap as well. I'm going to be playing with Reason a lot more now that we have the ability to use the players inside our DAW. If you've been waiting to update to Reason 11 and you have any of these old versions of Reason, it really is a no-brainer just to pick it up and see all of the new functionality that you can have inside your own DAW. And I just love working with all of these different programs. I'm not faithful to any one program. And I love that the companies are now starting to work together. They're realizing that we don't have to do everything ourselves. In fact, if we make things work better with other programs, people will get a lot more out of it, and it just works out better for everybody. So thankful to have all of these different devices and companies working together to help me make music. So hopefully I'm helping you make music. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell, and we'll see you in the next video.